All right. Can you hear me well? Perfect. So, well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's very exciting for me to be here in person for one time. And I'm Giorgio Quer. I'm the Director of Artificial Intelligence at the Scripps Research Translational Institute. And I'm here to talk to you about wearable sensor and artificial intelligence in order to enable digital clinical trials. So let's jump into this talk. So I wanted to talk about the Digital Trials Center. This is a new institute within Scripps Research. And they started really a couple of years ago. And we are working in very different domains. These are 6 of these domains. For each of them, we have a platform. And we run a large digital trial. So by digital, I mean we don't have a hospital behind. We don't have a physical site for people to enroll in our studies, but we do everything digitally. So we invite them through emails and so on, and they start sharing their own data. So there will be, most of the talk will be about infectious diseases and our platform for COVID-19. We also have a platform for maternal health. We follow women during their pregnancy and up to 6 months postpartum. I'll talk a little bit about our precision nutrition initiatives in which we try to predict an individualized prediction of glycemic response, and also about heart health, in which we do several initiatives in the cardiovascular space, especially for atrial fibrillation. So let's start with infectious diseases. I want to start with very practical things, just to explain what we are doing. This is one individual, and just as a spoiler, this is myself. And we're looking at the data, as you see here, from our Tact study. Such a simple data set. It's resting heart rate. It's one value per day of your heart rate value when you are just before you wake up in the morning. So it's independent on the activity you're doing. It really tells you somehow what is your level of heart rate. So we start here our journey at the beginning, mid-July. The average heart rate for me is between 56 and 54, 57, so around that range. And then we have a first initial change. This is during the month of August. This is an international travel between Italy and Finland, different time zones, and so on. The heart rate starts to increase, and I go up to 60, 64, 66, so 10 pulses per minute higher than the normal. Nothing strange. Interesting, as soon as I'm back in the US, the heart rate drops and goes down to the normal, 54, 56. With a small peak, this was a long weekend, maybe a glass of wine. What is really interesting here is what happened from this point on. So we are mid-September, the resting heart rate start to increase, and it goes on for about 2 weeks. At the end of September, it's a Friday. I'm feeling not super well. I have some mild, very, very mild pain actually at my neck. Nothing to worry about. But I said, well, that's a little bit strange. It lasts. I feel it for more than a week. So what's happening? I look back at my Fitbit, and I see that this resting heart rate is increasing for apparent no reason for 2 weeks. So I just called the doctor, book an appointment for the Monday after. The really interesting thing happened at this point. On Saturday, I got a really high fever, 103 Fahrenheit, and very persistent, actually. It didn't go away for a couple of days. Got to the emergency room, figured out it's bacterial infection, and whatever, got cured with many weeks of antibiotics. The really interesting thing here is to see how something was happening inside me without me being aware of. I spent 2 weeks of this increasing resting heart rate without even knowing that there was something happening. And these things actually went up for more than a week after I started with the antibiotics, up to 77 pulse per minute. Again, not a huge value. A doctor would, whatever, thinks that this is normal. It was not normal for me. It was 20 pulse per minute higher than my individual average. And then we went back to normal, and yeah, this was beginning of November. I'm almost back to fully normal. So, resting heart rate. This is the key initial, at least physiological signals that we look at. It's changed a lot, individual by individual, can go from 40 to up to 90 as average resting heart rate. And we see 3 cases here of individuals over 12 months. The first one is on the left. He has very stable resting heart rate over the course of the 12 months. The second one has a peak, something similar to what happened to me, and lasting for about 2 weeks. The third one is a woman in childbearing age, and that's this peculiar pattern of almost this frequency of going up and down with a monthly pattern. So what can we do with this resting heart rate? So my colleague, Jennifer Rading, started looking at that for flu prediction. This was a work done in 2019. And she tried basically to follow the rate of influenza-like illness. This was for more than a year using data from 100,000 individuals wearing a wearable device. And she demonstrated that she could do a little bit better than the standard algorithms done by CDC by using this population-based data set. And she was able basically to follow the signal in California and Texas. This was at the end of 2019. In 2020, COVID, as we well know, started. And we, from the beginning, we tried to do, to bring our contribution to, try to monitor the situation. And so we launched the Tact. The Tact is an online platform. It's basically an app that individual can download. They can report symptoms and test results. And this was launched on March 24 of 2020. And within 2 months, we were able to recruit 30,000 individuals who reported their symptoms and, most importantly, donated their wearable data connected to the app. And this allowed us to quickly start the analysis of this data and propose some initial solution. At the beginning, the data, yes, 30,000 people, but only a few hundred had positive test results. So we needed to look at very simple data, and this is what we looked at: resting heart rate, amount of sleep, and amount of activity for these individuals on a daily basis. And we first demonstrated that it is possible to enhance the detection of COVID-19 with respect to symptoms only. So by just looking at self-reported symptoms, we can say if an individual has COVID or another infectious diseases with an area under the curve of 0.71. Adding sensor data, so adding this wearable data, we can increase this area under the curve up to 0.8 with this initial study. This was published in 2020. It was followed actually by a large number of studies. Some of them have been done in parallel to ours, like the one from Stanford, published soon after. Then there has been one from Fitbit, who initially collaborated with us in the Tact, and then they started another study. We also have work from Aura and UCSD, Evidation, Whoop, and Mount Sinai. And this is by far not a complete list. It's just what was published in the first month between 2020 and 2021. the goal, at least for us, was really to look at any sensor and any data. So not everybody has an Apple Watch. We wanted to provide a tool for everybody, even with simple devices. So the idea is to look at all the data available. If someone has the latest Fitbit or an Apple Watch, or look at any available data, the simplest one, in case someone has a simpler device. The next step has been a machine learning algorithms to try really to include all the data available when present. And in particular, we looked at individual reporting or not reporting symptoms. Of course, the performance changed significantly. And the interesting thing of this algorithm is that we looked also at, we tried to explain actually what was happening. And so we tried to see which features was most important. We tried to look inside the machine learning algorithm, and we show that, well, symptoms when available are key. But there is a lot of importance also for activity, sleep, and this heart signal whenever they are available. In particular, in the absence of symptoms, they of course play the biggest role. This was the journey towards detection of COVID-19. We went on as the pandemic went on, and so we look also at the long COVID. In this study, we basically looked at individuals post-infection, and we followed them for about 3-4 months post-infection. And we noticed something very peculiar, actually, as you can see from the top left figure. This is the resting heart rate for 3-4 months after infection. We see that there is, this is a population-based signal. There is an increase of the resting heart rate that lasts a week or two. And then there is a short period of bradycardia, actually. The resting heart rate goes down, and then it comes up again and stays up for, on average, on this population, for about 3 months. So potentially much past the symptoms that the user experience. Indeed, we see that other parameters like sleep and activity goes back to normal after a couple of weeks. The resting heart rate, on average, stays like this longer. The really, interesting thing that I noticed here is was when we were able to look at data done by the Robert Koch Institute in Germany. They used the same algorithm that we did, but they look at a completely independent data set. So these are people from Germany, not from US. And the data is more noisy as they have less individuals. But you can see that they figured out the same exact pattern. So of this tachycardia followed by a short period of bradycardia and then a longer period of increased resting heart rate lasting for a couple of months. So this was about long COVID. We went on and we explored also vaccination. And here we tried to answer a simple questions. One, we wanted to study the reaction to vaccination. And we wanted to see, actually, distinguish between individuals who potentially have an unexpected reaction. And in the long term, we can provide some sort of reassurance to them. And on the other side, we want to look at also people who have no reaction that potentially may have an inadequate immune response. A couple of figures here. On the top left, we see individual after the first dose of the vaccine. Unexpected result, individuals who were previously COVID positive had a much higher reaction in terms of changes in the resting heart rate. And on the right, we see instead people with Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. It seems that people with a Moderna vaccine had a much higher reactogenicity in terms of changes in the resting heart rate. So this work was also supported by a couple of other studies, one of them from the group of ORA and UCSD, who also showed that, at least anecdotally, but there is a relationship between this and immune response. On a limited number of people, they were able to measure also the immune response and relate this to reactogenicity. So this is all about infectious disease. I wanted to at least touch a couple of our platform that we developed and open it up for questions. The first one is on heart health. Well, here, this is a different platforms that developed at Scripps. Here we are interested in atrial fibrillation, and in particular, we are interested in an early detection. Atrial fibrillation is this irregular beating of the atria. This comes with it's usually undiagnosed, and it comes with a 5-fold increase in stroke. Really important to detect it on time, such that an individual can be put in a proper anticoagulation therapy. This is very important, as this has been the very first study, digital study done at Scripps, potentially a pioneering work done in 2015, 2016. This was led by Steve Steinhubel, who sent basically this patch to about 2,000 individuals to monitor them and detect atrial fibrillation. Individuals at risk, but never diagnosed before. And he was able to detect AFib in several of them, and most importantly, he was able to show an actual clinical effect of this early diagnosis. And this was in terms of serious adverse events like stroke, a reduction in stroke, death, or myocardial infarction. From that, we really opened up a new world for us in analyzing data. So we can go from the detection of atrial fibrillation, several techniques we developed for explaining this black box, so explaining how this deep learning algorithm detection works with global and local explanation, and going towards prediction of adverse events and reconstruction. This is just a general overview. I'm happy to go into more detail maybe during the day if someone is interested in this particularly. And last, for just a minute, I want to talk about the precision nutrition and the individualized prediction of glycemic response. This is a new study at Scripps, currently running. We have, the goal is to enroll 500 type 2 diabetes and 500 healthy individuals fully digitally, and follow them with sensor, continuous glucose monitoring, and our sensor for 10 days. To me, as a data scientist, this is an extremely challenging task. The idea here, as I put here in the slide, is that we have a treasure, really, in terms of data coming from this study. And a really big challenge. So beyond having a lot of data, the data is really diverse. We have continuous data from the Fitbit or from maybe an acoustic signal. We have continuous glucose monitoring about every 5 minutes. We have food intake, self-reported. This is very complicated, as individual may or may not report food, and we can never really trust the data that we see. We have microbiome and genetic data. Microbiome is also something that can change, actually. I would particularly be interested in myself after a long antibiotics treatment to see actually how my microbiome has been changing in the past couple of months. So this concludes my talk. As a maybe final message I want to give here is, for us, it's extremely important, and it has been really the key point in developing all these platforms, is that tight collaboration between clinicians and data scientists, computer scientists. By tight, I mean the clinicians is leading the questions that we want to answer, but the data scientist is involved in this process from the very beginning, such that we can help the clinicians in starting the study, and we can especially help the clinician in selecting the right data to be collected. We don't want to just jump into the picture after with data collected, which may be useless for the analysis. So it's important to be there from the very beginning and lead the study together with a clinician, of course, who can drive the direction. And of course, all of this is possible only with partnership with a lot of colleagues in academics and industry also, which is, well, we can really not live without with these platforms. So this concludes my talk. These are just a couple of publications. Thank you so much. And again, I'm so excited to be here in person. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I applaud all of the work that you've done to set up a center like this. It's a gargantuan amount of effort and collaboration. I'm interested in going back, because you're using a lot of data from the Fitbit.
Yes.
And when you're recruiting these folks, so you're recruiting 30,000 for one particular study, how are you recruiting them, and how are they getting the Fitbits, and what have you seen as their compliance over time with respect to wearing them?
Yes, this is an excellent question. And so to reach such a high number, the idea is, well, we collaborate with a lot of companies. So for example, for the Tact, which is so far the largest one we have done, we initially work with CVS, Walgreens, we work with Fitbit, and we were quickly being able to reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of individuals. A great example is, as I mentioned, the Robert Koch Institute. They work directly with the government, and they have been able to enroll 500,000 people from Germany, and as a matter of a few months, if the government of course, get involved. So the recruitment happens like this. So it's really with partnership with companies who have access to hundreds of thousands of individuals. Regarding the Fitbit, so we did not provide a Fitbit to these individuals. We said if you have a wearable device, and we didn't request a Fitbit, we said an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, or another device that can be connected with either the Apple Health Kit or the Google Fit. Then you can be part of this study, and we developed a tool to connect to this device without, basically as a matter of a click from the point of view of the participant. In terms of compliance, well, it changes a lot. So first of all, it's their own device, and so they are probably used to wear it. And then it really depends. Some individuals wear it like myself, 24/7. Some other individuals may wear it for a short period of time. Some wear it through the night. We can also detect sleep, some not. That, of course, we don't have a control. And I must say, we don't have a control either for the studies like Progress, in which we provide the sensor. It's a big question mark. How much they want to wear it when they fed up, that's beyond our control. It's a big challenge from a data science point of view also. What do we do with this incomplete signal? But yeah. Sure.
To encourage them to continue giving their data, contributing their data to the study, and how you have been.
Yeah, this is an excellent question. So a couple of things. For some of the study, we provide some potential financial incentive or a device, and that is a motivation, at least in the short term, for our study, like the Tact, we could not provide any incentive to this 30,000, 40,000 now individuals. For them, what we try to provide is we try to return some of this information. So we try, for example, I didn't talk about it here, but we're also running a sub-study inside there in which we are running basically our algorithm for prediction, and we return some of this information to the individual. So yeah, the only currency we can really use is provide something useful to these individuals. Not easy, as what is interesting for us may not be interesting to a person wearing the device. But it's a big challenge, and companies like Fitbit or whoever is working with devices knows it very well, of course, that an individual may get tired of the device soon, so they need to provide information back. Yes?
Is there any concern on your part that maybe people that have their own Fitbit or Apple Watch are somehow a little bit different than the general population? I mean, I'm looking at your average resting heart rate of 52, and I'm thinking you're clearly some sort of an athlete. You run every day, and you may not represent the general person getting COVID-19. And how do you make adjustments for that?
This is totally true. The individuals who are wearing this device and they have it by their own are a specific population, and it's hard a little bit to generalize. So from a technical point of view, we don't really have a solution on how to do with that. In practice, what we try to do is we try to run some of these studies by recruiting a specific population who may not have these devices, and in a fully digital space, we can really go to even underserved population, as they don't need to be affiliated with a big hospital, a big research hospital. So we can target this population, provide them with a device, and really study how this is going for them. So we're attenuating a little bit this, but of course the numbers are different because we cannot provide quickly a Fitbit devices to 30,000 individuals. And maybe just a note there, which I think is really interesting. As we started, as I said, in March 2020, we started basically with almost zero funding. So this was, well, there was of course some funding to pay for our work, but there was no big funding at the beginning, as well, COVID just started a couple of weeks before in the US. And the incredible things of this platform is that you can potentially run this study with almost zero funding, and then of course to sustain it you need funding. But yeah, the initial things may come without big things, yeah. Yes?
Okay, so I'm very interested, like when you start the trials on the platforms, how do you make the decision, like what kind of devices you're going to use, what kind of data? Is there like some principles that you can share that what kind of device we would need in terms of the time, the burden on the patient, and budget and stuff?
Yeah, there are, you mentioned it well, it's a trade-off between many different things. One is, for sure, the budget, if we need to provide the device to the individuals. The burden to the patient is a big thing. Of course, these devices that we usually use are totally passive. You can wear your Fitbit, your smartwatch, and forget about it, as I did there for 2 weeks. I was not even checking my Fitbit, and then look back at my data. So the other aspect is, of course, we need to meet the need for the clinicians who want to see maybe a specific type of data. So we need to put all of this together, and study by study we need to decide actually what we can provide to the individual. In progress, the one on the prediction of glycemic response, we opted for a wearable device, passive like a Fitbit, and this continuous glucose monitoring, which was, of course, the meat really of the study. That is an implant, well, a device that goes, a Dexcom devices, so it's less, well, more intrusive, let's say, for an individual. There is, of course, a balance there to be played, but yeah. Oh.
Should we thank the speaker and